Former President Donald Trump made his first court appearance last Tuesday, pleading not guilty to 37 federal charges before heading directly to the campaign trail, shaking hands with supporters in Miami and declaring his innocence in front of a friendly crowd at his New Jersey golf club. As the field of 2024 Republican presidential candidates grows, how will they handle talking about the party's frontrunner and his legal battle ahead? Paul Kendrick is the executive director of Rust Belt Rising, a political research organization. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the criminal case underway. There could be more to come between Georgia and federal situations. What's your view? This is what you study. This is what you research. What do his challengers need to do? Do they challenge him? Do they lay back? Chris Christie challenges them. Most lay back.
You can't run against someone if you're afraid to run against them. And DeSantis and others are trying to thread this needle of being seen as the better general election bet, but not wanting to anger or lose favor with Trump fans that constitute a lot of today's Republican Party. They will need those folks to win the nomination. But ultimately, if they're going to gain traction, they have to put forward their story and their vision in a way that catches fire and be seen as strong enough to say self-evident truths, like you can't take classified documents that endanger our service members, and that's what they're going to have to be able to seen as to do.
So, as you know, the field, I mean, some thought it would be a much smaller field in 2016, but it continues to grow. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez joining the race this past week. There could be others. In terms of the first Republican debate, it's only 2 months away, August 23rd. What would be your suggestion and strategy to these Republican challengers of Trump on the debate stage when some version of indictments are live and active?
Yeah, they have to have an effective answer ready. So Nikki Haley and Mike Pence had a persuasive element of one when they made it personal. They said, I have a loved one in the armed forces. What Trump did jeopardizes my loved one's life. But then they undermined their answer when they said, but you can't trust the DOJ, it's politicized. Okay, that's feeding into Trump's conspiracy theories to try to escape accountability and invalidate things. So they want Chris Christie to really damage Trump and be seen as the white knight waiting, but there's too many of them right now, and they're going to divide up a limited pool of non-Trump votes.
And part of that is because Trump's base stays solid at 30+%, so they've got to divide up everything else between them. If Trump is indicted, in addition, if Georgia or January 6th comes after him or something, up till now, it seems like with each indictment or bad situation, poll numbers go up. What's your sense of what he'll experience?
Yeah, we've seen that his poll numbers have gone up. Republican voters are saying they're more likely to vote for him because he was indicted. DeSantis' favorables have gone down. Usually in a political campaign, if your opponent gets indicted, that's a good thing for you. But this is a unique situation with Republicans rallying around him. So those who oppose him have to tell a story of right and wrong. It was wrong in Georgia to try to have people's votes thrown out. Everyone's vote should count. It's wrong to have classified documents as bathroom reading material at your residence in a country club. It's really wrong to have your organization committing financial crimes. We're tired of elites doing that. People have to be willing to tell that story and communicate what these stakes are all about in these cases.
Instead, it's just to a lot of the whataboutisms. What about Hillary and what about President Biden and Pence and all of that? You know, research shows, and this is your world, a significant number of people believe that the former president did commit a crime, should be prosecuted, but a very similar number said, and by the way, this whole thing is politically based. How can both things be true?
Well, those that are saying it's politically based, that is driven in the poll by Republican voters that have heard for years Trump's sense of victimization, that he is persecuted. One thing that caught my eye in a poll from an organization called Navigator is 71% of independents said this classified documents issue gave them more concerns about Trump as the head of the Republican Party. And when you gave those independent voters a range of familiar concerns about Trump, they said the classified documents was the second most concerning one. So this could make a difference at the margins. If an election comes down to Wisconsin and a few thousand votes, the margins matter.
Let's switch to the other side. President Joe Biden, because Democrats have their own challenge. How do you recommend he, if at all, should address the fact that 2/3 of Democrats don't want to see him running? They might be happy with what he's done, but age is an issue for them. And also, he's not wanting to address the indictment issue, and a lot of Biden supporters are not happy about that. How does he deal with age, indictments, in the face of the fact that, Democrats would rather see somebody else?
He's doing the right thing because this indictment came from an independent special counsel. Trump's defenders are trying to say Biden brought it about. He doesn't want to cause confusion on that. However, other Democrats need to make the link that this case isn't just about Trump. It's about a party that has aided and abetted him and cheered him on in this kind of wrongdoing. And to hold on to the independent voters that made up who voted for Democrats in 20 and 22, you have to ask them, who are you more comfortable standing with? Is it this MAGA party that you felt was extreme in these last two elections? And so that's where the other Democrats have to make clear that this isn't just about Trump. This is about a Trumpified MAGA Republican Party.
Looking ahead, what trends in voter viewpoints should we be looking for? I mean, should we, things short-term impact versus long-term issues? Primaries are not that far away in March. What will you be looking for?
A long-term viewpoint I'm looking at is that voter outside Milwaukee or Grand Rapids. Is it more important to her Trump's freedom or her freedom over her own body to be able to when and whether to have a kid? And the freedom of people to be themselves without discrimination, the freedom for good public schools, clean water, Social Security protected, your wages that are good and that respect your work. Who do people associate with that? And is Biden getting credit for his actions causing an economic improvement when you look at the Recovery Act, job creation, bipartisan infrastructure, repairing roads and bridges, the Inflation Reduction Act and clean energy manufactured creation in the Midwest, prescription drug prices coming down. Do people give Biden credit, and do they say he's more focused on me and what I care about, and he cares more about me? That's what I'll be looking at.
Only about 20 seconds for this one. Let's bring it home to Pritzker. Pritzker holding a fundraiser for Biden in the near future. What role does it look to you as somebody who studies this he's looking to play in 2024? I'm talking about Pritzker.
Yeah, he wants to help Joe Biden be reelected because things he's passionate about, like protecting reproductive freedom, defending LGBTQ plus people, immigrants, stopping book bans, he's set himself up as in contrast to Governor DeSantis. So those values are on the line, are at stake in this election, and obviously Governor Pritzker wants to make sure those values win.
All right, Paul Kendrick, thanks for being research-based and sharing your thoughts. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Still to come this morning, while lawmakers are away, construction at the Capitol kicks into high gear. Inside the renovations that experts say will last for the next century. And who's paying for it? You might not be surprised. That's after the break.